Maybe I'll shoot the first question.
You can start.
I've heard somewhere rumors that you don't like the second part of Hellraiser, Hellbound. Is that true?
I didn't think it was consistent. I didn't think the second movie was consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was as perverse as I would have liked. I thought there were really wonderful things in the movie.
There were some Bosch things.
Oh yeah, there were some great things, but it wasn't consistent. And so I'm a limited admirer, put it that way, of the movie.
Yeah, you should know the German version because it's about 10 minutes.
Shorter?
Shorter, yeah.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding. The whole resurrection sequence of Julia
Has gone?
has gone down the drain. There's nothing left.
It's worrying. It really is. It's very distressing. I get reports from around the world of...
Yeah.
In France too.
Yes, in France. It was cut in France?
Major cuts in France.
Really?
Yeah. We got two versions. The French version was uncut,
Mm-hmm.
but the British version with subtitles was like 10 minutes shorter too.
Boy, I don't know. And the trouble is you've got no control over any of this. I mean, once the movie is gone from your hands, people can do whatever they like, wherever they like. There's just there's no logic to it, you know? But maybe it's naive of us to expect logic.
Had you any problems with the MPAA for Nightbreed?
4 X's we got, which surprises me because we got 1 X on Hellraiser, and we got 4 X's on this one, which is very surprising because the movie is nowhere near as graphic. But they didn't like its intensity. They didn't like the scale of its intensity. They didn't like the amount of, like, for instance, one thing they wanted to take out, they didn't get to take out. They wanted to take out the moment where the snakes appeared from the stomach.
No.
Yeah. And I said, why? And they said, oh, it's disturbing, it's distressing. And I said, yeah.
Had you cut out something?
We lost probably about 25 seconds in total. It's not as much as we might have lost. Originally they gave us 17 things they wanted us to cut.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And it's getting worse all around. I mean, it's getting worse in America, it's getting worse in Europe, it's getting worse.
You cut how many from 17?
We ended up cutting 6 of the things that they were, But the fact is, well, you know the old story, you really have extremely little power. I mean, they have a lot of power over you, finally.
Like, France is supposed to have no censorship.
Yeah, in
It's been like this from 10 years from now, and still the copy that comes from the United States is kept
It's still
at the start, so there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem with having having film, films that use the American cut in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a problem right there.
Yeah.
This may change after '92. It may very well be that we'll have a whole different attitude to the way that, the European market
Hope so.
takes.
Hope so.
Yeah, sure.
There's one scene in the movie when you show the Inquisition
Yes.
that as soon as I saw it, I thought about Ken Russell.
Sure. Yes. It feels a little Ken Russell-ish, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that.
Was it planned?
Well, no, but I love The Devils.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an extraordinary movie. But I wanted the whole movie to have the flavor of a delirium.
Mm-hmm.
The whole movie was designed to be a kind of fever dream. It begins with a dream, and then the audience is thrown into this ride, with a barrage of images. In fact, I've just been down the road to look at the Bruegel paintings, with all those monsters pouring off the canvases. And I thought, yeah, this is in the spirit of Nightbreed, or Nightbreed is in the spirit of Bruegel. I love abundance. I love having, when I come out of a movie, I love having so many images running around my head. And I wanted to make a movie that constantly kept surprising the audience, that kept changing direction, weaving around, so that you're dealing sometimes with very, very literal, realistic places, and then you move into these mythic places, and then back to the realistic, and so on. Because finally what the movie does is confront two completely different worldviews, one reality-based and one fantastical, the world of Midian. And I think that one of the extraordinary things that Danny Elfman does in his scoring is help to pull those two worlds together. I think he gave us a wonderful score for the picture.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, yeah.
But the whole movie has a fantastic rhythm. I mean, you just have no time to wonder what's going on. You
No, it's like,
take the pictures and think
Yes.
after the movie.
Yes.
You can think about
now I like that as an audience member. I like that. One of the things I feel about a lot of horror movies of the last decade is their predictability. This is certainly true of stalk and slash movies. After a certain time, you realize that every 7 minutes some girl is going to take off their clothes and get killed.
Yeah.
And even the Nightmare on Elm Street pictures, which use the murder scenes as a starting place for some extraordinary special effects, nevertheless, you know pretty much what's going to go on.
Genie slashers, they have their certain laws to
They have their laws, exactly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of take the audience on a ride, which, while it made a lot of references to very well-known horror cliches, if you like, I wanted to use the cemetery, I wanted to use the mask, I wanted to use the unmasking scene, I wanted to use the creature that's killed by sunlight, and I wanted to use the shape changer, I wanted to use the person who changes into smoke, I wanted to use all of these, the whole idea of going into the underground, going into the darkness, the descent into the underground, which has such mythic connotations. I wanted to use all of those things, but I also wanted to tell that story in association with another story, that is, use the 1980s tradition of the stalk and slash villain and point out for the audience once and for all that this was really a very disgusting kind of character. You know, I wanted the audience to end up hating the stalk and slash villain instead of finding him the most interesting thing in the movie, which I think is what ends up happening in Halloween and the Friday the 13th pictures. I mean, you like Michael Myers because the girls are so dumb, you know. I mean, that's, you know. Whereas I think the Nightbreeder are more interesting than Decker.
No competition.
Let's hope. Yeah, well, actually, it's very interesting. I did an interview yesterday, and somebody said to me, I don't know what this means, but somebody said to me, he said, I found the trouble with the movie for me was that Decker is so much more interesting than the Nightbreed.
Really?
Yes. So I couldn't help but say, I said, that might reflect your personal sensibilities a little bit there. You know, you should ask your analyst why you think that. You know.
Maybe that's a little due to the fact that the Psycho is played by
Cronenberg.
Cronenberg.
Not a bad argument. Not a bad argument. Possibly. I hadn't thought about that. But I also think it may be because there's a certain kind of sensibility which finds the outlandishness of the fantastique element in Midian too much. I mean, there's an audience that says, no, this is just too weird. You know? Not many of them, but I think there's a few who just find the sheer abundance of it too much.
Yeah, I think for me, for my person, it was this inclusion of the realistic level was very good, because to a purely fantasy movie, I would have no relation, or it would be hard for me to get a relation. I was a little scared of watching this movie because I knew of this interview and I knew that I had to find it good.
Right. Well, no, you could have come along and said it's a bunch of shit, Clive.
Yeah. I would have said so. But,
sure.
But I saw the masks, yes, and I said, I thought, Mel, this is some kind of Jim Henson stuff with Muppets and so on.
Yes.
And then I went into the movie, and there were parts where my mouth was open. It was really open.
Great.
I loved it. Yeah, I liked it better than Hellraiser 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Great.
You
too?
Oh yeah.
Great.
I
Great.
just couldn't find any question to ask after the movie.
Well,
I just took it and said,
Yes,
what else can we do?
I had a very special question to movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't, you hadn't developed the characters in the movie, not in the same way you did in Cabal.
Sure.
For example, I missed a very pretty masturbation scene.
Yes. Well, yes. The masturbation scene did go. Yes.
X-rated.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yes. What I tried to do in the movie, and it was an aesthetic decision, was pare the elements down to their purest forms. So the movie would work as a series of experiences which were not strictly realistic. So that there's a great, and it's a European tradition. There's a great European tradition of fantasy filmmaking, which almost becomes surrealism. It becomes so intense. I would say the best Argento pictures fall into that category. I say the best Mario Bava pictures fall into that category. Movies which become so extraordinary in terms of their psychology that it just becomes this assault of strangeness. And one of the things that does get sacrificed in that structure is precise, close character analysis. And I decided for once to see what would happen if we did it. The movie was designed, in other words, to work the way that one of my favorite movies of all time is Fantasia works. Fantasia is this extraordinary assault of wonderment, strange images, and you just embrace it. Now I know a lot of people who don't like Fantasia. They don't, they don't have anything to hook onto. I love it. I think it's pure imagination. It's wonderful.
Jump into it and enjoy it.
Jump into it and enjoy it. And I hope that people do that in Nightbreed. They'll jump in and enjoy. And there's going to be I don't think we lost anybody from the showing last night. I think people have a good time with the movie, even people who would maybe like more psychological stuff. But I wanted to make something which was just a spectacle, an epic of monsters.
What do you think of Chinese movies?
I love Chinese movies. Chinese Ghost Story is one of my favorite movies of all time. Wonderful movie. Again, pure sensation. Wham, 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 I mean, who knows what's going on? In the middle, somebody breaks into a song. Fabulous.
In many Chinese and Japanese movies, there are those fairy tale elements near it.
Absolutely. And there's also this extraordinary... fast, but it can be sexual, it can be very erotic, it can be very monstrous and scary, and it can be, because the Chinese Ghost Story has some extraordinary, the long tongue stuff, extraordinary, very sexual, very scary, and you just enter it. It's like a fever dream. Wonderful stuff.
Don't you think that the hero in the Nightbreed, he had an accident with the truck, he was shut down, but he always had very good styled hair.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. I think in the sequel he should get messed around a lot more. No, I wouldn't disagree with that. One of my favorite scenes in the movie actually is the initiation scene, when he actually gets the wounds removed from his chest. Maybe having had the wounds removed from his chest, he went to the Midian hairdressers and got it all fixed. Craig actually did a very good job for us in the movie. Craig Sheffer did most of his own stunts and so on, and I think worked real well. David did a lot of his own stunts as well. It was pretty impressive.
We asked this morning, we were talking to Bobkin.
Oh yes.
I asked him if he thinks you're a monster. What do you think his answer was?
I think it was probably yes. Bob and I have a great relationship in the sense that his creativity knows no bounds, and when we get together, our imaginations are working together. We just have a wonderful time. His team seems completely without limit to their imaginations. We just sit there. Yeah, just an extraordinary experience. Yeah, and there's a lot of humor in what he does as well. A lot of humor in him as a man, which is great. He's just great to work with.
When you start Nightbreed 2?
Well, I got a novel to deliver first. But we really won't get a sense of how the movie is done worldwide until the end of this year, because it really doesn't open in most of the European venues until the autumn. And video is obviously one of the huge markets now. So really it's a year from now before we really get a sense of how it's doing. Hopefully we'll have a sequel. I think the opportunities to tell the story, go on telling the story, are huge. And I wanted to make a movie which was the beginning episode, if you like, of a whole series of stories.
Because that's funny, when I saw the movie on Thursday. Usually I don't like sequels. I'm just
right. Sure.
not interested. I think sequels are for the public that doesn't really like cinema.
Yes. Yes.
So,
interesting. Yes.
And after the movie was finished, the first thought I had is, what's next? I want to know what's next and see what's next. That's the most important thing. Before I wonder if the movie was good.
Right.
That was not the point. I wanted to see what's next because it must be good.
There's so much more to tell. But the other thing is, while I agree with you that most of the sequels we've seen in the last, I don't know, 10 years have not been great, I would instance a few exceptions. I think Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was a good movie. I think The Bride of Frankenstein was actually a better movie than Frankenstein. I think House of Frankenstein is actually not a bad movie. I think a couple of the sequels to the Hammer Dracula series were good movies. In other words, I think Godfather 2 is a wonderful movie. In other words, it's not impossible to go back as long as the material in the first place is interesting enough. Now, part of the problem I think that, say, the Halloween series or the Friday the 13th series have is that the fundamental material is not that interesting. It's a guy with a mask and a machete.
That's it.
To kill off.
Did David Cronenberg, this very great and perfect director, influence you when you direct Nightbreed?
His style is very different. His style is very chilly and remote. Mine's a very heated style. He influenced me rather more on Hellraiser than he did on Nightbreed, actually, because Hellraiser has the kind of a more chilly, detached quality than Nightbreed. He said actually to me, he said, you know, this is not, I couldn't make this kind of movie while we were making Nightbreed. His whole approach is very, very different. He enjoyed himself immensely. He loves the movie and he loves himself in the movie, which is also very nice. He's very proud of himself in the movie. And quite rightly, because I think he does a very good job. So he was real pleased. But no, his style didn't influence me hugely.
Also not in this way of you have to do this in this way or
no,
this way.
no. He was, for one thing, he was much too worried about the problem of being an actor. It's my second movie. It's his first playing a major role. So he was concerned most of the time simply to be an actor.
I think there's a problem with Cronenberg in the movie, is that we don't see, personally, I didn't see him as Decker. I saw it
as
Cronenberg playing Decker.
That's a difficulty. Interestingly, though, most people don't know who David is. They haven't seen him in interviews. So you have. You're familiar with him. You've done interviews and so on. Most people haven't, so I think it's less of a problem for most people.
But it's good for. I like to see him in a movie.
Yes, I think he did a good job.
Yeah.
I think he did a good job.
And he has a bad role too.
Oh yes, true, absolutely.
What kind of material do you prefer? I mean, this Nightbreed was some kind of melting of fantasy and horror elements.
Right.
Hellraiser was, for me, more horror oriented.
I agree.
It was very grim and very pretty cruel. Yes,
Sure.
this was more fairy tale.
Yeah.
What do you like better?
I'm moving more towards the kind of mixture which Nightbreed proposes. One of the interesting things for me about the fantastique is the scale, the breadth that's possible. It's a genre which can involve science fiction, horror fiction, heroic fantasy, so on, magic, eroticism, all kinds of extraordinary material. One of the disappointing things for me about the way that the fantastique is usually presented is how narrow it very often is. The horror movie, the science fiction movie, the fantasy movie, there's too few crossovers. David has done crossovers. I think there's an argument that says that several of his movies are at least tinged with science fiction.
Mad Scientist.
Sorry?
Mad Scientist.
The Mad Scientist, exactly. This movie is absolutely tinged with fantasy. The books that I've been writing recently, The Great and Secret Show, Weave World, the book which I'll go back to in London tomorrow, which I'm presently involved in, are, I suppose, dark fantasy. But the terminology deteriorates the closer you look at it, it seems to me. Because is Frankenstein a piece of science fiction, or a horror novel, or a gothic romance? Is Wuthering Heights a horror novel? People come back from the dead in it. There's ghosts, you know. Yeah. The fact is, the terminology becomes self-defeating after a time, and I think that one of the wonderful things about European criticism, which is horribly missing in American criticism, is that it's much less bound by the kind of generic terminologies which I think are a huge curse in American criticism, and indeed in the way that marketing is done in America. This movie, Nightbreed, was horribly marketed in America. They sold it as a slasher movie.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was one of the worst campaigns I've ever seen.
Fangoria stuff. I mean, this is in America, most of the fans of horror movies are juveniles, yes?
Yes, I'm afraid that's true.
And for adults, it's simply not serious enough?
Yes, it's not legitimate.
Sophisticated?
Yes, exactly. The kind of generic crossovers which we're talking about are simply not accepted. It's almost as though they don't exist.
Yeah.
And that is very limiting, I think. It means that the kind of more ambitious, it means you either get Willow, which is fantasy, you know, or you get Night of the Living Dead, you know, which is horror. The only way that the American structure seems to be able to embrace both is in the use of dreams, which is what Wes Craven has obviously is a furrow that he has plowed many times now, in which he uses the dream format as a way to break into fantasy. But even then, finally, the fantasy aims to horrify, so it brings you back around to the horrific. I love the tradition of fantastic movies. I love Ray Harryhausen. I love Vadim's Barbarella. I love Fellini's Toby Dammit. I love Fellini. Fellini makes fantasy movies. There is a very rich and multifarious tradition of the fantastic in Europe, which is simply doesn't have an American equivalent.
Like Rawhead Rex and Underworld?
Yes, well, yeah, you see, Rawhead Rex and Underworld are movies which drove me to making movies, because here were people wanting to make movies for the American market. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make movies which were simple. So they cut everything out of the scripts which was ambiguous, and they made it more and more simple. They took out the surrealism. One of the things which I love about fantastic movies is how very often it can present you with extremely surreal images. And I love the possibility of of breaking into these kind of dream images, these extraordinary and sometimes I think quite bizarrely beautiful things. I think Pinhead and Hellraiser is sort of bizarrely beautiful. I think many of the Nightbreed have a kind of beauty to them. Spanish Shinasasi is gorgeous. I think she's a really sexy item. And these creatures are part of a European vision of what the monster can be. When George Pavlou, when George Pavlou came along and wanted to make Underworld and Red Rex, what he wanted to do was make American movies. Basically, I want to make my kind of movies, and if the Americans like them, great, and if they don't, what am I going to do about it?
Did you always want to be a director, or?
No, I'm a director by accident. I'm a director to protect myself.
But would you accept to direct a movie from someone else's script?
I don't think so. I think my life is too short. I've got a lot of things going on in my life, which, in the way of books and so on, and comic strip and so on.
You took a director to act. Do
yes.
you want to act too?
Not really. I enjoyed David's work immensely. I enjoyed working with him, but no. I mean, if somebody invited me, I suppose I wouldn't say no, but it's not a major ambition.
Maybe David will.
I don't think I should hold my breath while I wait.
What's most satisfying for you, writing or shooting?
Writing. Because it remains a much more intimate process, and nobody can interfere with it. Part of the problem for me of movie making is dealing with producers who don't share your vision, dealing with publicists who don't understand the movie you've made. That doesn't happen with books, and I enjoy the process of writing immensely. Which isn't to say I want to give up making movies, but I've written 10 books and made 2 movies, so there's right there you've got perhaps a sense of where my enthusiasms really lie.
If you could pick, let's say you cannot direct the next movie that comes from one of your books.
Yes.
And you have to pick the director. Which one would you choose?
Does he have to be alive?
Not. No.
James Whale.
James Whale.
James Whale. Franchou.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Oh,
Yes.
yes. Wonderful movie.
Yeah.
No?
It's rated.
You don't like it?
I have the uncut version just received in Belgium.
Right, really. Extraordinary movie.
It's among the 10. I was amazed in the United States. I found a book that was with annotations with the 10 most important critics in the United States.
Really?
And these guys were rating the best horror fantasy movies of all times.
Right.
And 6 out of 10 put Les Yeux Sans Visage in the list. That was amazing among King Kong and Frankenstein.
Sure.
And 6th or 7th position, you could see Les Yeux Sans Visage.
Good.
That's great.
This is another melting of different
oh, yes.
ideas. This is extremely poetic at
Yeah.
times, and there is horror in it. There is a mad scientist in it.
Sure. Sure.
The whole atmosphere is very clinical.
Yes, it's sort of surgical Jean Cocteau, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I think somehow that some of David Cronenberg's movies look a little like.
I wouldn't disagree. I
Brute,
think,
for instance.
though, I think that David doesn't have the same poetic sensibility that Franchou had. Extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed something in the movie, Babette's mother.
Yes.
When Babette is burning outside the
Yes.
outside building, she cannot get out to pick her up.
Right.
But in the same time, she's the mistress of energy, isn't she?
Yes.
So the point is, can she go out and pick up Babette or not?
No, she can't. The sunlight is there to protect her. At one point we see her moving through into the police cell,
Yeah.
covering herself up. Maybe she could have got out of smoke. I haven't thought about that.
Isn't that strange?
Yes,
Because she
I suppose it
masters
is.
energy and
Yeah. I should correct that in the sequel.
I don't know. I noticed that. Before.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point.
Perhaps some words about the ending of Nightbreed.
The ending?
The ending, it looks like happy ending and walk down the sun,
Yes.
the sun
Yes.
down, and in your book Cabal, it
Right.
was, another way.
Well, yes, in Cabal she kills herself in the breed and Decker, and so it seemed to me inevitable that we should end we should end the movie with the breed, and then have our little punchline, which is also which is a pseudo-religious punchline. I mean, it's a resurrection scene. You know, he's crucified on an angel, and we get a little scene with the heart. This is not a movie for Catholics.
Was it your choice to change the ending?
It was my choice, having seen that the other one didn't work. We tested the other one, and the audience pointed out to us, and testing can be useful because you can learn things, that they were less interested in Laurie or Laurie's story, if you like, than they were in the story of the breed and the story of Decker. And I think it was a correct thing to do. I think it leaves the movie in a sort of gothic, dark fashion, which I rather like. I love moving through all the fires and the burning corpses to the cross and stuff like that.
That brings me to another question: gothic and dark.
Yes.
You chose a very fast timing.
Sure.
Very fast timing. For a gothic or dark movie, would it be better to choose a very more slow, like Cabal?
We cut the movie in, you're talking about the cutting speed now, yes? We cut the movie in a way that would make it a ride, make it a ghost train ride. I wanted, as we were saying earlier, for the audience to come in, get gripped, and just go with it. There's certainly another way to make this story. There's probably thousands of ways to make this story, and one of them would be a much slower, much more measured, much more psychological way, and that would be a legitimate interpretation. I chose something which was much more sensation-based, and part of that is because I like those kind of movies myself. I like to be taken by the scruff of the neck and, you know, taken on a ride. And part of it was because there was a sheer abundance of wonderments that we had to show. You know, when you've got someone like Shuna Sassy in a scene, you want to be able to see her do what she's doing. You want to be able to see Peliquin do what he's doing. You want to be able to see the creatures of Midian and so on. If we had allowed all these creatures and all these storylines a slower pace, we probably would have had a 3.5-hour movie on our hands. I like the fact that the movie is abundant, and I hope that what that means is that people will be able to go back to the movie again and find new things in it. That's the hope, anyway.
Why did you use 2 editors on the movie?
One was an English editor, one was an American editor. We moved the picture from England to America in part to accommodate Danny Elfman, who wanted to work in America, didn't want to leave Los Angeles. And so we removed ourselves to LA, and Mark Goldblatt, who edited, what did he edit? The whole bunch of pictures. He did a movie called Commando. He actually directed a movie called The Punisher.
Dead Heat.
And he did Dead Heat as director. I think he also did he cut Dead Heat? Did he edit Dead Heat?
Don't know.
Don't know. But he's a speed man. But he also knows all the European precedents. He knows Franchot. He knows Argento. He knows Bava. In fact, he knows obscure movies that I didn't even know existed, which is great. He's one of the few American editors that I know who's incredibly well versed in European fantastique. So he was a good combination for me. We should finish, I guess, shouldn't we? Yes. Sorry. Yes. Have you been interviewed, Mr. Keane? Oh yes.
Oh.
Any final questions? Any final questions?
Would you like to work in collaboration with a Chinese filmmaker?
It would be wonderful. I'm looking more and more to the East. I would love to do a story about the East. Is Chinese Ghost Story on tape here, on video?
Yeah,
Yes,
Histoire de Tonton Chinois.
Is it?
As a matter of fact, Chinese, you could read in hours in Chinese Ghost Story 2 is about to be finished.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And is there? And can you buy it on tape, or do you? Can you only hire tapes here?
Well, Chinese Ghost Story was shown in the United States, in England, on BBC Two.
Sure, absolutely, but it wasn't. I didn't tape it. But,
I
We
have it
did.
on tape, but a very good version.
but you can't buy it. Can you buy the video?
Do you have a VCR?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, no
We
problem.
could tape it, sorry.
We
We'll come to London in April and we'll see Mr. Keane there. So
Mr. Keane now, is it? My goodness me. Well, I would love it if you could, and I'll pay for the tape. It'd be
Yeah, that's no
wonderful.
problem. We any movie from Hong Kong you want, you just
That would be great.
tell me and
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that would be wonderful. You're coming to see Mr. Keane, huh?
yeah.
Okay, jolly good. Well, I will away. So this is interesting
That's a fanzine we just started.
Yes.
Because of
because of this stuff.
I think you love these guys' movies.
Well, any of these movies which you think are great that you could put on tape for me, I'd
Yeah.
love it.
Okay.
The Charlie Chan stuff as well.
Oh, all the John Jones.
Yeah, I have a couple of those. Have you ever seen some of the
Do
Charlie
you know a
Chan?
movie called Onibaba?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite movies. I love that.
Chinese Ghost Story is a
Right.
Chinese too will have has fantastic photography. We saw part of it from
Where was it being shot?
in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Mhm.
Would you put any of these films which you recommend? Would you put on tape for me?
Sure. No
That would be
problem.
wonderful.
No
And
problem.
the London Dungeon, huh? Okay. Great.
One final question. I can't
Yes.
hear it any longer. You're the future of horror. What do you think of it?
What I've been saying to what I've said repeatedly now to my editors around the world is stop using that quote.
Yeah.
You know, it's high time that quote was left to die quietly.
If they use it too long, it's gonna being the past.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. No. I think it's high time they stopped using it, and hopefully they will.
Have you read about this to Stephen King?
No, it's not Steve's problem really. It's my editors' problems around the world. That they like the quote, you know, and I've said I'd like them to stop using it, and they promise they will. So we'll see. We will see. Okay, so
You could sign this for us.
of course.